Hello to all the viewers watching, and welcome to the worst of the internet. Now, to all the new subscribers, you may be wondering, the fuck is this shit? To which I'll tell you that this is one of my long dead shows I used to run on this channel when I first started to learn how to edit. Now, you may also be wondering, why is it still not dead? This is trash. To which I would also tell you it is because I'm at an all-time low on the old creativity juices, and this is relatively easy content to shit out. It is also in an effort to branch out into different forms of content for this channel, as even if I did exclusively make montage parodies, they take much longer than I'd like to admit to make. So, unless you want a video ranging from every 2 weeks to every 2 months, you might just have to stick with this for the time being. Also, this is a topic I've been wanting to cover for a very long time, and I think that I now have the competency and tools to do so. So, in this video, we're going to be taking an in-depth look into that of the furry community. Before we get to that, however, I just want to say that the reasons and events that make the reasons why the furry community is one of the worst things on the internet is actually quite unfortunate and makes me almost feel sorry for them. Regardless, without further ado, let us take a look into that of the furry community to find out why it is one of the worst things on, and not exclusive to, the internet. Now, with something as diverse and vast as the furry community, where are you supposed to start? The degeneracy, the depravity, the all-inclusive nature of this community caused by something we'll get to later, to which I theorize to be the main reason of most of its downfall's existences? No. Instead, we're going to cover a good part of the furry community first, as it is important to understand that just because most of something is bad, doesn't mean that all of it is bad. So, for a starter, something genuinely good about the furry community is that it unites people under a commonality. A commonality that, by itself, isn't all that big of a problem, if at all. The reason that this is a good thing, by itself, is because it allows people to interact with each other in a manner that they would not be able to otherwise. Now, these interactions are typically positive, by themselves, and where there is positivity, where there is also no downside / detriment, well, I don't see the problem with that. However, notice how I keep pointing it out when I say by itself or themselves. Well, that's because I'm only referring to the fact that it unites people under the commonality of anthropomorphic animals. The fact that it does this is good, and I'm only actually referring to the smaller part of the community that this applies to fully. Which, by the way, you could also expect more good things from that will not be mentioned in this video for the sake of brevity, and not the larger bunches of people who engage in the more depraved acts, those who retract from goodness that the unitarity is supposed to give through the commonality between people relating over the fondness of anthropomorphic animals and what that is supposed to give due to their acts. I hope you got that, because furries often complain about how they are misrepresented in the media, which is true to an extent. But the only problem is that, well, there is a reason that these stereotypes, or connotations rather, exist. Stereotypes exist for a reason. There is a reason to their existence. Those reasons being the reasons furries are one of the worst things on the internet. What are these reasons, I hear you asking? Well, we will get to those in due time, because to do that we need to cover the origins of the furry community. So, it all begins with the anthropomorphization of animals. Animals given human qualities / characteristics. You know, things like Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck, Winnie the Pooh, Wile E. Coyote, Mickey Mouse. What, Wiki Mouse? Ooh, okay. Mickey Mouse, etc. People who watched and liked these cartoons began gradually evolving, mind the pun, into the fandom that we know today after a few important conventions and events that happened along the way, right? That's a good explanation, right? Well, no. Whilst it is most likely true that the fandom was born through increasing interests within the concept of anthropomorphic animals through people who watched and enjoyed cartoons / media relating to such, and that it is also most likely true that there were key contributing factors / events that happened to set the seeds for the proper formation of the furry fandom. There is one key detail that is missing from this explanation to make it cohesive with what we see in the fandom today, and that is that not everyone who watched these cartoons is a furry. I actually used to watch Looney Tunes when I was but a small child, and Looney Tunes has anthropomorphic characters in it that I actually still enjoy to this day. Hell, I'll even go as far to say that the cartoons back then are infinitely better than the shit that we have now. And despite the fact that I watched and enjoyed those cartoons, I'm not a furry. So, I can have the exact same experience as someone who does become a furry and yet not become a furry myself, meaning that there is a certain characteristic that separates me and other people like me from people who would otherwise become furries. What could it be? Well, I think I got a cohesive, but also probably very controversial answer to that question. Now, it is worth saying that everyone is different, meaning that there are people that this does not apply to, as not every single furry is socially inept. However, from what I've seen from videos of conventions and the general way people carry themselves and interact within the furry community, I don't think that it is all that bizarre as to go to say that the majority of the furry community probably has impaired or lacking social skills / abilities. This isn't just supported by what we see, however, it is also supported by what we don't see. You see, not to curb my own enthusiasm, so to speak, but I am a very sociable person. I get along well with basically anyone who I like or am different to. But with that, tell me, when was the last time you saw a furry having a conversation with non-furries and seen them not look uneasy, uncomfortable even? It almost looks as if they're supposed to be following a script that they don't know the words to. Hell, just look at the way these furries interact with these kids.
You ate her grandma.
She tasted good.
No, she didn't.
I'm telling you, she tasted good.
No, she didn't.
I'm telling you from experience, grandmothers, they're good. They taste good.
I don't know. They're eating people.
Sometimes people need eating.
What are you guys doing? What are you guys doing?
Hanging out?
In costumes? Seriously?
Why not?
We got some why you guys do?
He keeps doing the same thing over and over and over again because he doesn't know what else to do. He doesn't know how to act in this situation. And the same applies to a lot of instances I've seen with furries talking to one another. Look at this, for example. Notice how they laugh it off and they guess what the one in the middle is doing? This one has enough confidence to be doing this in the first place, but it almost sounds as if to the rest of these people, midway through guessing what it is, they realise, holy fuck, this is cringy, I'm just gonna go and laugh it off so I don't look as if I'm uncomfortable with this whole thing, and look as if I fit in with the rest of the people here, despite the fact that most of the other people are probably thinking the same thing. But anyway, at least this is the way I interpret this. They just don't sound very genuine to me. It almost feels as if they feel as if they're obligated to do this when they just really aren't. Now, yet again, there are plenty more examples I could give to prove this, and at the same time I could find a few exceptions. But with that being said, with what we see between most furries as a whole and what we don't see with people like me, I think it's safe to say that the distinguishing factor between me and a majority of furries is in fact a lack of social skills. But you may be wondering, well, what does a lack of social skills have to do with the many downfalls of the community? How is that the mean that causes all the problems? Well, let me tell you how. You may think, oh, well, why exactly would they feel uncomfortable in those situations you've just listed? Well, I'll tell you. Listen up, as this is the key thing that brings all the points I've made previous and all the points I will make later together. You listening? Okay. They don't like to feel judged. Furries, more than most fandoms, do not like to be judged. This is because the overwhelming majority of the furry community came from roots where they felt excluded from groups due to social ineptitude. though not strictly limited to. It could also be for a myriad of different reasons. This is just one I found most common. Now, seeing as one of the reasons they end up here is due to the fact that it is comprised of similar people who also felt judged to some capacity, they would go out of their way to make it feel as if you are welcome, whoever you are, because that also ensures it from themselves, right? Well, yes. Yes, actually, that is the case. The furry community came together to try and prevent themselves from being judged, and in the process created a huge safe space for anyone to envelop themselves into. Anyone. Now, I'm just warning you, before you get to this part, if you're particularly sensitive or don't like big strong language, I would recommend that you either click off or go to the timestamp that's on screen, because, well, there's some very not nice words coming up. So, you have been warned. Mersuiters, ferals, and cubs. Huge big fuck-off piles of the scum of the earth. Now, in modern society, it is generally looked down upon to 1. Fucking animal costumes. 2. Fuck anything that isn't a human. And 3. Fuck or even remotely be attracted to children. And yet these are 3 huge subsections of the furry community. Remember how I was talking about how the furry community came together through vested interests in the topic of anthropomorphic animals, and then later talked about how a common trait shared between these people who ended up as furries is that they're not good at socializing, and then how due to this fact the people who compromised it ended up trying to create a huge safe space to try and ensure that they all felt included, as that was a thing that they were lacking prior? Yeah, well, in doing so, they ended up basically cutting all semblances of criticism and instead opted to promote anything that someone does. This was the fatal, yet inevitable mistake. This allowed people to start to do shit that would be serious no-nos in regular environments and get away with it. With the lapse in criticism, it allowed people to end up getting into things that would otherwise be looked down upon. You see, normally when people do something that is looked down upon, they get criticism from everyone else telling them, no, whatever you're doing is not good. The majority of the time, this keeps a person who got told that from dabbling into that shit again, as they know that if they do it, they will be shunned for such. This simply does not exist in the furry community, or at least to a capacity that would actually matter. Now, due to this, the degeneracy that the furry community is all too well known for exists. Now, time to get to the juicy bits. Fucking in anthropomorphic animal costumes is not a good thing. Some of the particularly righteous people who may or may not be viewing this video may ask, what is wrong with fursuiting? It's not hurting anyone, and the people who do it enjoy it, and there's also none of your business. What right do you have to tell them it's not okay? To which I'll tell you that whilst someone who pisses and shits themselves on a regular basis may enjoy it, and whilst yeah, it doesn't technically hurt anyone, it doesn't mean that I'm just going to sit here and condone that shit or turn a blind eye to it. And the same applies to mersuiters. Mersuiters would not exist were it not for the complete lapse in criticism this community has. And there has to be a point where you just have to draw a line and say, fuck. Nope. Fuck nope. That is absolutely disgusting and not a good thing in any regard, to which can fuck off to hell. Mersuiters to me, and everyone else on this planet who aren't furries, cross that line, in the same way that that theoretical person who enjoys pissing and shitting themselves does. Now, another thing about the furry community is that they would like you to think all the depraved shit that goes on is only a very, very minute amount of people. This is also not the case. I'm not going to name the people I'm referring to here, but I know at least 3. 3 people who engage in mersuiting and are also simultaneously substantial furry YouTubers. What the fuck? One of them is a former mersuiter who I presume does not do that shit anymore. Huge respect towards him for that, at least, I guess. And the other 2 still most likely do to this day. One of them even going as far to say, if you don't like mersuiters, then fuck you. Which I find real humorous, because it's like if a meth addict said, if you don't like meth, then fuck you. Which, I mean, your opinion's real substantial there, mate. Fuck, don't I feel like the asshole now? Jesus Christ. I would tell you to get fucked, but you'd probably enjoy that, wouldn't you? Also, tweets relating to mercy and getting an alarming amount of attention. We're talking from thousands to tens of thousands to even millions of impressions. I mean, think about it. What sequence of events has to happen for someone to think that it is a good idea to take photos and videos of themselves, which by the way, most of the time of cameramen, engaging in the sorts of activities that Misconstrued engage in, within anthropomorphic animal costumes, and then to upload it to the internet for strangers to see? Like, I'm just reading this shit back, and it's just drilling into my head, like, these... Oh my god. Okay. Well, I mean, God remains dead, and we have killed him. Oh, and by the way, every other furry YouTuber I've seen who has talked on the topic of mersuing has said something along the lines of, well, if you're not hurting anyone, then that's okay, which is so fucking stupid. Have our standards dropped so far to that as to say that just because something isn't hurting someone means that it's okay? Have they really dropped to that fucking low to where just because it doesn't hurt someone means it's okay? Fucking hell. Fucking, or even being remotely attracted to animals is not a good thing. Now, compared to mersuing, ferals are actually a point of contention within the furry community. Thank God. The only problem is, well, the efforts by the people who actually have a problem with it within the furry community are piss poor at best. They simply say shit like, if you like ferals, then you're not welcome in this community, which, let's face it, isn't going to deter jack shit. Another thing about it is the amount of people who condemn ferals within the furry community compared to that of the people who engage in feral activities to any measurable extent is smaller than that of the people who actually do the shit in the first place. And even then, the people who do engage in that shit prop each other up in artificial echo chambers of their own opinions, so even if the rest of their community stepped up their game when they actually came to trying to oust ferals, the chances are that they'll just ignore it all and look instead to all the positive feedback they get from all the other like-minded individuals who do that shit, which, I mean, the broader community allowed them to do in the first place, might I add. Now, a big argument for any informed furries that may be watching this video may be something like, what do you mean this community is a safe space? Have you ever seen furry Twitter? That place is toxic, not to mention all the criticism we get from non-furries in the media, to which, yeah, furry Twitter is toxic. It's toxic when it comes to the actual people who don't engage in all the aforementioned bullshit, bickering amongst each other, and not towards the actual people who fucking need it. And even then, most of what I've seen when it comes to arguments between furries is fucking light work. It's like Xbox during the Modern Warfare 2 era without all the sexist and racial slurs and fun. Not to mention all the criticism you get from the media and non-furries. Have you seen how many documentaries have been made on YouTube by places like Vice and ABC? They all end up being this, oh well, turns out the fandom isn't actually that bad, things that just take about as deep a dive into this subject matter as a pebble does dropped from 6 feet into fucking Challenger deep, comparatively speaking. The only bad thing I've ever actually seen from the media about furries is that one CSI episode, and yeah, I understand that obviously there have been other things that have talked negatively about them, but come the fuck on, it's not that bad. And also, when it comes to non-furries saying yif and hell fur fags, that isn't even a criticism. It was a thing invented to piss overly serious people off in the fandom by shitposters. Not genuine criticism, which, by the way, if you think it is genuine criticism, then you're just wrong, mate. Getting back on topic, ferals. Don't try and come at me with that not needing vocal consent bullshit, because it's a fucking animal and does not have the capacity to give consent, meaning that you're f***ing the fucking thing. And don't try and come at me with that spiritual connection bullshit either, because your spiritual connection is about as real as Epstein killing himself, meaning that it's not. Look, unless you can apply the scientific method to the so-called spiritual connection and prove it's real, then that's real cool, mate. But you're still fucking something that isn't a human, and therefore can take a flying fuck into a jet engine as far as I'm concerned. fucking or even being remotely attracted to children is not a good thing. Big claims only coming from the Player Incognito channel. Now, the gimmick, for the lack of a better term, that comes with these peoples, with whatever the fuck they identify as, is that they technically aren't pedophiles according to them, because most of the shit they look at isn't real. Oh no, I'm not attracted to children, I'm just attracted to anthropomorphic animal children. Is this a fucking joke? Is someone who is attracted to a child featured in a video game still attracted to children and therefore also a pedophile? Fuck yes! Just because it does not exist does not make it instantly right. It does not matter if it is a furry child, an obese child, or a virtual child. If you are attracted to a child, you are a fucking pedophile. And, I mean, these people exist. These are genuine people that fucking exist. You know, it's really good to know when, like, how someone's path in life has ended up leading them to feeling obligated to defend/justify pedophilia. Fucking amazing. Moving on to something more lighthearted, furry cringe. Everyone loves furry cringe. Just look at the views on those puppies. Oh, where to begin with furry cringe? Well, I think that we'll start with a good thing that came from it. The Furry Gamer War. The Gamer Furry War is something that I actually really wish would return, because it was a thing that brought places from both communities together to have a light-hearted fictional conflict, which to me just seems like the greatest idea. Hell, I even downloaded TikTok because of it. And now, sure, I immediately uninstalled it once the whole conflict was over, but it was still fun as fuck for the whole thing whilst it did last, and I really wish it would happen again. Ah yes, Tequila Shepherd. Tequila Shepherd probably has the best looking fursuit I've seen in my misadventures with this fandom. The eyes, the oversized legs, the moving mouth. I can't quite pinpoint what exactly it is that makes me like it so much, but everything about it is just cool and is definitely one of the best fursuits I've seen. I mean, her content, at least on TikTok, is something else to behold, but everything else seems to be just fine. Now, cringe. Furry cringe is yet another offset brought on by the lack of criticism this community has, because they ended up doing like these things that in the community is cool, but then to the rest of us just seems yikes. Now, at least this shit isn't quite the degeneracy that we see in the other sections of this community. And if I'm honest, I'll settle for this any day of the year over some of the other shit that they get up to. Though with that being said, okay, I'm gonna be real with you. I can actually handle furry cringe quite well. It may have had something to do with the fact that I've exposed myself to it for so long that I can feel cancer formations in my joints. It may be because I'm just good at handling cringe. I don't know. However, what I do know is that despite what I may think, some of this shit is just really makes you think, why do you do that? Do you have no frontal lobe? Regardless, furry cringe is not the reasons furries are among the worst things on the internet. It does not even register on the bullshit-o-meter when it comes to that. It is completely inoffensive, but at the same time, well, cringy, so take it as you will. There, to me, is nothing inherently wrong with being a furry. There are genuinely great and talented people within the community who can make brilliant works of art and the like. The only problem is that once you see through all the good it has to offer, it has some of the worst and most depraved bullshit behind it, and on the entire internet. Were this community to somehow buck up its ideas and philosophies to attempt to oust all of the raging degenerates that lurk within it, I think that it could become something great. They just need to get over that hurdle of bracing the fact that You know, they're gonna have to hurt some people's feelings to do so, and may even get theirs hurt in the process. But seeing as that does not seem to be the case currently or for the foreseeable future, this has been why furries are one of the worst things on, though not exclusive to, the internet. "25 minutes? Holy fuck, how am I gonna make a 25-minute long video? Jesus Christ.